Hello. Well, do you all have your matzahs already bought and waiting for the Seder? Do you know when those matzahs were baked? Well, I'm pretty sure that you know that they were baked before Pesach because most people I know, everyone I know, buys their matzahs before Pesach. I don't know of anyone who would even think of trying to bake matzahs in their own home during Pesach when you know that just let that dough get out of your sight or out of your hands for a minute too much, and it's already become chametz. It's surprising to learn then that there are views that held that matzah should not be baked before the isur of chametz sets in, which, as you know, is even midoraita from the Torah. It's already in midday on the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach. And there are various arguments that are put forward, mostly based on a hekesh, an analogy between matzah and korban Pesach. Just as korban Pesach was not slaughtered before midday when there was an isur of chametz, so also they felt that matzah should not be baked before that. There are other arguments made as well. Chaviva mitzvah b'sha'ata. It's more important. It's more pleasing to do a mitzvah just at the time that it sets in. With the mitzvah of eating matzah will set in with the beginning of the holiday on sunset. So you should try and make the matzah as close as possible to that as one can. And much of I'll be talking about this briefly. Much of what I have learned, though not all of it, but a lot of it is from a very fine, learned article by a certain Yaakov Gartner, published in Sinai, the journal put out by Mossad Rav Kook 40 years ago in Tafshin Lamed Chet. If anyone's interested and asks in the comments, I'll give a full reference and link. Well, it's interesting that really our first inkling, our first evidence that there is this need, this halakhic urgency, maybe to bake matzah only on the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, in the afternoon, comes from some questions that arose in that very problematic situation that we all have encountered in the past. That is when when Pesach falls on a Sunday, when Erev Pesach is Shabbos, and then there are a lot of issues here because, of course, we can't burn chametz on Shabbos, but we need to have a lechem mishnah and all sorts of other issues. But their lives are complicated by the fact that they felt that they had to bake matzah Erev Pesach in the afternoon, and of course you couldn't do this when Pesach comes out on Sunday. And we learned from these responses that actually there were people who said that no, that what you have to do is after Havdalah, on the day when the Sabbath is over, then you bake matzah. Now, of course, this means that the Seder will start very late because it takes some time to get the oven heated up and to bake the matzah. But and this means that you may really have a very short time to do the Seder before it becomes too late to eat the afikoman. But they didn't care. That was it was considered such an important need to bake matzah before the Seder, or I should say, it was considered so wrong to bake matzah to bake matzah too early, to bake matzah before noon on Erev Pesach, that they said, well, we have to live with it. Now, what the interesting point, and I think this is the greatest thing, the most important thing that this Yaakov Gertner discovered in his article, is that all of these tshuvot, all of these responsa, all this literature indicating that there's a strong urgency, maybe even a chovah, even a religious necessity to bake matzah in the afternoon of Erev Pesach, come from Ashkenaz, medieval Ashkenaz, and more specifically from the school of Rashi, Rashi, even though they cite Tshuvot Gaonim, the Gaonim of Babylon, but the sources of these of this literature is all from Ashkenaz, from like I said, coming out of the Beit Midrash of Rashi, and it's interesting that one supporting uh, evidence for this is that in some of these shuvot they raise the problem that in those days they would employ non-Jews, to help around the house, and especially when you have to do things like baking, and they said that there's a problem in doing this on Saturday night because this is already Sunday, the holy day for Christians, and so you couldn't get people to help you with the baking, which again indicates that the source for this particular issue is coming from the Christian areas of Northern Europe. Now, the critical point in this story, the point where it looks that the urge to bake matzahs only on Erev Pesach afternoon seems to be around the 14th century, with the writing of the Torah written by Rabbi Yaakov, the son of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, a critical moment in the history of halacha in general. Just to briefly sum up a very rich chapter in history that really needs a long treatment. In the 14th century, the Jews of Toledo invited Rabbeinu Asher, who was an Ashkenazi, who was the pupil of Maharami Rutenberg, one of the greatest rabbis in medieval Ashkenaz, to be their rabbi. Now, Toledo had already been for over 300 years under Christian rule. It was one of the first cities retaken in the Reconquista. But even so, the Jewish community in Toledo maintained its Andalusian Judeo-Arabic culture, and they, I wouldn't want to call them Sephardi because Sephardi hadn't really emerged as a grouping in Jewish history until after the expulsion from Spain. But they maintained the old Andalusian Judeo-Arabic culture, some of which you may know from the so-called Golden Age of Spanish Jewry. For example, using Arabic as their written language and probably their spoken language as well. So I don't know exactly why they had to turn to Rabbeinu Asher, but there was some definite tension about which we are fairly well informed. Rabbeinu Asher moved to Toledo, but then his children, he had I think 4 sons, became pretty quickly acculturated in the Spanish setting, and Rabbeinu Asher even himself in his commentary of the Gemara and in the Torah, we see almost a melding of some Ashkenazic rulings that Rabbeinu Asher brought and imposed, and some the more indigenous rulings that the Rabbeinu Asher seems to have accepted. Whatever reason, the Torah gives the most forceful statement of this. The Torah makes it sound as if it's asur. You're not allowed to bake matzah too early. In Siman Tanakh, this is a paragraph 458 of the Torah Orach Chaim, begins Ein matchilim etasek bepat, pat meaning matzah in this case, ba'arba'asar adachar sheish sha'ot. One does not begin to work on to prepare the matzah before 6 hours have passed on the 14th of Nisan, Erev Pesach, making it sound as if there's a binding religious law and not just a custom in some Jewish communities. And right after that, he tells us that there was a case of someone who had already got rid of all of his chametz. There was no chametz in his house. There was no problem of lotus bacha chametz dam zivchi, because there was no chametz in the house, but it was before 6 hours of Erev Pesach, and he baked matzah, and for asur rabotenu hamatzah. Now, I don't know exactly if this means that they said that he couldn't use his matzah for the Seder, because matzah mitzvah, we need matzah that's been prepared according to the highest standards, or whether they considered it to be totally invalid, almost like Chumash for the holiday. But this is where the mitzvah, where the need to keep to make the matzah on Erev Pesach peaked and became almost a chovah. Afterwards, the Shulchan Aruch, which, as you all know, follows the arrangement of the Torah and follows him, and probably in many or most halachot, things became much more moderate, and the Shulchan Aruch uh, records this only as a minhag, and I'm sure you all know, this is completely forgotten. It's not relevant to our day at all. And for example, in Chazon Ovadia, the summation of Rabbeinu Ovadia Yosef and his rulings, is not even mentioned. There's not even discussion of this. One late and Ashkenazic authority who does talk about this is the Aruch HaShulchan, and I really like Aruch HaShulchan because I think he's got really brilliant analysis and great learning and an open mind. So in his it's the same seif, the same paragraph 458 of Orach Chaim, he talks about it, but it's purely academic. It's lamdanus. It's learning for the sake of learning. It has no relevance in our own day, and he says this. But it's interesting that he has some correct observations. For example, he connects this custom of baking matzah specifically on Erev Pesach before afternoon, to what he calls the ancient custom of baking fresh matzah every day during Pesach. Now, as I'll say in a minute, this is actually a custom that was and may still be kept by some Yemenite Jews. In Yemen, they all did it. And I don't think that Aruch Shulchan knew about it. He inferred this from that same Torah, with the Torah in that same long paragraph 458 says that there was he notes the minhag of Barcelona, where he says that almost as a sort of a surprise, that they bake all their matzah before the holiday. And the Aruch Shulchan says, well, the way he talks about it, it's a chidush, and it's a very good insight. Yes, so he thinks that in those days, it was odd for a community to be baking all their matzah before the holiday. People, would have ordinarily baked fresh matzah every day. Now, as I said, this was the Yemenite custom, and it's not simply, I don't know what to call it, conservatism. The Yemenites have a strange idea that matzah should taste good. That matzah, we should have matzah hot from the oven and tasty. It's something that seems totally odd to us, who some people like matzah, some people don't, but it's not considered a delicacy. It's it's a mitzvah. My uncle used to say that eating matzah is like eating wood. I don't know if that's completely true, but they felt that that when you say chaviva mitzvah b'shata, well, matzah should mitzvah should be something pleasing. It's not, we don't do it just to fill our bellies, but shouldn't it be it's not moror. And so it's interesting that Aruch HaShulchan inferred this from the literature, though he probably didn't know anything about the Yemenite custom. I think nowadays, there's a move to there are people who now they market the soft matzah, and as usual, there are those who say yes, those who say no, but I think we're moving in the right direction and trying to make matzah should be something that we eat b'te'avon, not just because we're hungry, because there's been nothing to eat in the house for a few days, but because matzah is a wholesome and appealing food. So I hope you enjoy your holiday and enjoy your matzah. Chag Sameach.